If this really is a top priority, as it should be, then we need the Government of Canada to stand up for Canadian workers, for Canadian jobs, for the Canada-U.S. relationship right now, today and tomorrow.
That's Alberta's Premier. He's looking for federal help to keep the Keystone XL pipeline expansion alive. It is on life support again. President-elect Joe Biden has long promised he would cancel the permit for the pipeline project, and now it appears it is one of the first things he'll do when he's inaugurated on Wednesday. Premier Kenney invested $1.5 billion in the project last year, and now he's scrambling to come up with a strategy to deal with the fallout. Heather Yourex-West reports.
A little more than a week before Joe Biden emerged as the presumed Democratic presidential nominee, Alberta's Premier placed a bet.
It is a solid bet that will produce a handsome return for Albertans, and it will rescue the future of our energy industry.
A $1.5 billion purchase stake in TC Energy's Keystone XL pipeline, as well as $6 billion in loan guarantees.
It was so much money to put on a project that it was entirely foreseeable that it would be canceled. I mean, that's one of the things that Vice President Biden campaigned on.
Reports that the now U.S. president-elect plans to kill Keystone on day one may not be surprising to some, but Alberta's Premier says construction on the pipeline was already well underway.
This is, I believe, without precedent for an American administration retroactively to seek to cancel a piece of infrastructure, this border crossing, that already exists.
By getting pipes in the ground and taking steps to improve the industry's environmental performance, both the Alberta government and the industry had hoped to see the project forge ahead.
The problem is the perception is so strong in the U.S., and Keystone is such a flashpoint that I don't think any of that's going to matter.
But for a premier that campaigned on jobs, economy, and pipelines, the political cost of losing Keystone could be great.
This is another piece of bad news on top of what's been a couple of months of extraordinarily bad news. He's in the basement in the polls. He's the lowest polling premier in the country.
There is a certain irony that the Trans Mountain pipeline, which was purchased by Trudeau, will be built, and the pipeline purchased by Jason Kenney won't be built.
That is, unless the new U.S. president can very quickly be convinced to change his mind. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
By Wednesday afternoon this week, the Trump administration will be history and Joe Biden will occupy the White House. A whole new team of people with new priorities will be in charge of the country that's our nearest neighbor. But don't expect a big honeymoon. As Eric Sorensen reports, irritants like Keystone XL are already emerging.
Behind the scenes, the Government of Canada is in contact with the Biden transition team. In a statement, the Minister of Natural Resources reiterated Ottawa's support for Keystone XL, adding, "We continue to make the case for it to our American colleagues." The official opposition is calling on the Prime Minister to reach out to Joe Biden to keep Keystone alive.
Reach into the new U.S. incoming administration and make those contacts and ensure that everybody understands how important this is to the North American economy.
Blocking Keystone would not come as a surprise. Joe Biden and his new climate czar, John Kerry, stood with President Obama when he turned down the project 5 years ago. President Trump signed an executive order to restart it, but Biden's campaign made it clear last year he would terminate it if elected.
We need a unified national response to climate change.
And since the election, Biden has stacked his cabinet with officials who opposed Keystone XL and reflect a massive turn by Washington towards tackling climate change.
Defeating this threat is the fight of our lifetimes.
A decision by Joe Biden is expected as early as Wednesday, after he is officially sworn in. Canadian environmental advocates say it should be viewed as an opportunity for this country to embrace a greener economy.
We have a real chance because this is a president who has said, president-elect who has made it very clear that the climate is going to be on the top of his agenda.
This is not a surprise given that global markets are making it clearer than ever that the jobs of the future are jobs that help us fight the climate crisis, and that's where we need to make investments.
Pipelines aren't the only challenge for Ottawa. Biden is also promoting Buy American policies that could impede Canadian trade.
If it is something that we see as a disadvantage for Canada, Mr. Trudeau will not hesitate to pick up the phone and speak to Mr. Biden and try to negotiate a settlement.
In other words, whatever the hurdles in Canada-U.S. relations, the Prime Minister is expected to have a better working relationship with the incoming president than he had with the outgoing one. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And Global News will have live coverage of the inauguration from Washington, D.C. on Wednesday morning at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific.